If you think prison breaks only happen in movies, think again. Before you scroll, make sure you're subscribed because this story is one of the most unbelievable crimes in American history. The morning of June 6, 2015 began like any other in the quiet upstate town of Dannemora, New York, population barely 4,000. The Clinton Correctional Facility stood like a fortress on the edge of town, its concrete walls stretching nearly 40 feet high. Inside were over 2,700 inmates, including some of the most dangerous men in the country. But by sunrise, the unthinkable had happened. 2 convicted murderers were missing. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. Officers rushed through cell blocks, calling rolls, slamming steel doors, counting heads again and again. But cell 23, in the honor block, the section reserved for well-behaved inmates, was empty. David Sweat, 35, and Richard Matt, 48, were gone. At first, guards thought it was a mistake. Clinton was a maximum security prison, escape-proof, they said. No one had ever made it out alive. But when officers opened the cell doors, what they saw made their blood run cold. Behind David Sweat's bunk was a perfect square hole cut through solid steel. Beyond that, a narrow tunnel disappeared into darkness. Inside the cell, the men had placed dummy heads under their blankets, sculpted from towels and flesh-colored paste to make it look like they were sleeping. Every detail had been planned, every second calculated. For Warden Stephen Reset, it was a nightmare. 2 killers were on the loose, and no one had any idea how long they'd been gone. As investigators followed the hole through the wall, they discovered a maze that seemed pulled straight from Shawshank Redemption. Except this was no movie set. Sweat and Matt had cut through a steel pipe, crawled under the prison, and followed a series of underground tunnels that twisted for hundreds of feet. At the end of the passage, they had sliced open a manhole cover just beyond the prison's north wall and vanished into the early morning darkness. Hours later, the news broke nationwide. 2 convicted murderers escaped maximum security prison in upstate New York. For residents of Dannemora, fear spread like wildfire. Helicopters circled overhead. Police cruisers blocked every road. Federal agents swarmed the surrounding forests with thermal imaging equipment and dogs. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How did this happen? Investigators soon found their answer, or rather, her. Her name was Joyce Mitchell. Joyce was a 51-year-old prison employee who worked in the tailor shop, managing inmate labor. She was married, a mother, and by all accounts, quiet and friendly. But she had grown unusually close to the 2 escapees, especially Richard Matt. Inmates and guards alike had noticed her laughing with him, slipping him extra materials, lingering by his workstation. At first, no one thought much of it. Matt was a manipulator, a charmer, even behind bars. But the relationship went far deeper than anyone imagined. When agents searched her home, they found love letters, dozens of them, written by Matt and Sweat. Some romantic, others chillingly detailed about their plans to start a new life together. According to investigators, Joyce had smuggled tools into the prison. Screwdrivers, hacksaw blades, chisels, hidden inside packages of frozen hamburger meat. The inmates used them to slowly carve through pipes and walls over several months, working only at night, covering their tracks each morning before inspection. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. The escape sent shockwaves through the U.S. justice system. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo visited the site himself, walking through the dark, claustrophobic tunnels the inmates had crawled through. He said, "It was like stepping into a movie set, except every inch of it was real." Over 1,000 officers joined the manhunt. Police combed through the dense forests of the Adirondacks. Schools shut down.
Homeowners locked their doors for the first time in years. But behind all the chaos, investigators still couldn't answer one haunting question. Why would a married woman help two killers escape? Joyce Mitchell finally broke down after hours of interrogation. She admitted to bringing the tools. She admitted to planning to pick them up outside the prison that night. She even admitted that the three of them had discussed murdering her husband so she and Matt could run away together. But when the time came, Joyce said she got cold feet. Instead of waiting near the escape point, she checked herself into a hospital, claiming chest pains. By the time she was discharged, the men were long gone.
The public was stunned. The media called her the prison guard's mistress and the woman who fell for a killer. But those close to the case saw something more tragic. A woman manipulated by two seasoned predators who saw her loneliness as their ticket to freedom. Still, her role couldn't be denied. Without Joyce Mitchell, there was no escape. Days turned into weeks. Sweat and Matt vanished into the mountains. Locals reported seeing shadows in barns, hearing footsteps in their backyards, missing food from kitchens. Police searched every inch of a 16-square-mile area and found nothing. Then, on June 20, 14 days after the escape, the hunt took a deadly turn. A man named Richard Matt was spotted by Border Patrol Technical Unit near Malone, New York, just 30 miles from the Canadian border. When officers closed in, Matt raised a shotgun. He was shot and killed instantly. But David Sweat was still out there. And as agents examined the scene, they noticed something strange. A map drawn on the back of a cereal box showing trails leading deeper into the forest. The handwriting matched Sweat's. He wasn't running blindly. He had a plan. A new fear spread among officers. If Matt and Sweat had helped once, could someone else be waiting for him on the outside? By day 15, the forests around Dannemora looked like a war zone. More than 1,500 law enforcement officers, state police, U.S. Marshals, Border Patrol agents, even military helicopters scoured the dense Adirondack wilderness. The woods were thick, cold, and crawling with danger. Deer hunters and campers had been replaced by tactical teams with rifles and thermal scopes. But David Sweat, the last man standing from the Clinton prison break, had vanished like smoke. Investigators pieced together his movements through tiny traces, food wrappers, footprints, DNA on a discarded soda can. He was surviving in the wild, moving mostly at night, sleeping in hunting cabins and stealing supplies when he could. They knew one thing for sure. He wasn't running south. He was heading for Canada. The border was only 30 miles away, and the clock was running out.
Meanwhile, the story had exploded across the country. Every news channel replayed the same images: the gaping hole in the prison wall, the underground tunnels, and the face of Joyce Mitchell, the woman who helped them escape. The media dubbed her Tilly, her nickname around the prison, and America couldn't stop talking about her. Was she a victim of manipulation or a willing accomplice? Had she fallen in love or had she fallen apart? Joyce was charged with promoting prison contraband and aiding escape, serious felonies that could send her to prison for years. But when detectives dug into her background, what they found painted a haunting picture. She'd been married to Lyle Mitchell, another prison employee, for over 2 decades. Their life in Dannemora was quiet, uneventful, until Richard Matt arrived. Matt was charming, artistic, and manipulative. He painted portraits for guards and inmates alike, and he knew exactly how to read people. He called Joyce the only one who understood him. He told her she was beautiful, that she deserved better, that he loved her. For a woman living a small-town life of routine and regret, those words were intoxicating. But Agent Joseph Guarino of the New York State Police saw through it instantly. He said this wasn't love, this was control. Matt and Sweat used her loneliness as leverage. They turned her into a weapon. Joyce confessed to sneaking in tools, food, even frozen hamburger meat stuffed with hacksaw blades. She admitted she'd agreed to meet them after the breakout and drive them south to a safe house. But the plan fell apart at the last minute. Her nerves gave out. Her body shut down. She went to the hospital instead. That decision likely saved her husband's life, because in later interrogations, she admitted that Matt and Sweat had planned to kill Lyle once she met them outside. It wasn't love, it was a setup. While Joyce faced the public's fury, the search for David Sweat intensified. Officers found a cabin break-in near Owl's Head, New York, where the fugitive had stolen food, a rifle, and a GPS device. They knew they were close, but the forest terrain was brutal. Endless hills, cold rain, and swarms of mosquitoes thick enough to cloud the air. Officers worked in 12-hour shifts, combing swampy ground and thick brush. Many started calling the mission the New York Jungle.
Then came the first real lead in days. A local named Donald LeClaire called authorities after hearing gunfire near his cabin around midnight. When police arrived, they found fresh tracks, heavy boot prints, cigarette butts, and a discarded backpack with prison-issue underwear inside. They were closing in. Forensic teams confirmed it. The DNA belonged to David Sweat. Meanwhile, in Dannemora, Warden Stephen Reset was quietly forced out amid growing outrage. Investigators from the Inspector General's office found serious lapses in prison oversight, unchecked fraternization, smuggled goods, and missing tools. Clinton Correctional wasn't as escape-proof as everyone believed. It was crumbling from the inside. The FBI's final report would later reveal that some guards ignored red flags, others allowed boundaries to blur, and one even admitted that Joyce Mitchell's flirtations with inmates were an open secret. The culture inside the prison had allowed two killers to plan their breakout in plain sight. By June 25th, 20 days after the escape, the manhunt entered its final phase. Officers found a makeshift campsite just outside Malone, not far from the Canadian border. Inside were prison clothes, half-eaten cans of beans, and a map torn from a local guidebook. They realized Sweat was less than 5 miles from freedom. Every unit was ordered to converge. Then came the breakthrough. On June 28th, Sergeant Jay Cook of the New York State Police was patrolling a rural road in the town of Constable, about 2 miles from Canada. It was quiet until he saw a man in camouflage jacket walking along the shoulder. The man looked exhausted, his clothes ripped, his face gaunt from weeks in the woods. Cook slowed his car, stepped out, and shouted, "State police, stop!" The man bolted. Cook chased him across an open field, yelling again for him to stop. But when Sweat turned his head, Cook recognized him instantly. David Sweat, the most wanted man in America. Sweat was just 1.5 miles from the Canadian border.
Cook fired 2 shots, hitting him in the shoulder and torso. Sweat collapsed. He was captured alive. After 23 days, the longest and most expensive manhunt in New York history, costing nearly $23 million, was finally over. When paramedics arrived, Sweat was pale but conscious. He later told investigators the truth behind the escape. He and Matt had spent months cutting through pipes, crawling through a steam tunnel every night between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., timing the guards' rounds perfectly. They used tools smuggled in by Joyce Mitchell, blades, drill bits, flashlights, all disguised in frozen meat deliveries. They even practiced their crawl routes, memorizing each turn in the underground tunnels like a map of freedom. Sweat said he trusted Joyce to pick them up outside the manhole, but when she never arrived, they ran blindly into the night. They split up days later when Matt grew sick and reckless. Sweat tried to continue alone. When asked what his plan was, Sweat smirked and said, "Canada. Just wanted to see if I could make it." Joyce Mitchell pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison, later released on parole in 2020. David Sweat was returned to custody, placed in solitary confinement at 5 Points Correctional Facility, where he remains today. The Clinton prison escape became a symbol, not just of a daring breakout, but of how manipulation, complacency, and human weakness can bring down even the strongest walls. But there was still one lingering mystery, one that investigators never fully answered. How did Richard Matt and David Sweat learn the prison's inner layout? The tunnels, the blueprints, the blind spots? Because according to maintenance records, those maps were never supposed to exist. And someone, somewhere, had to have given them access. By dawn on June 6, 2015, the forest around Dannemora, New York was alive with the sound of helicopters, barking canines, and radio chatter. For the first time in over a century, 2 convicted killers had escaped one of the nation's most secure prisons, and no one had seen them go. The news spread like wildfire across America. 2 inmates on the run, possibly armed, extremely dangerous. It was the kind of story that felt ripped from a movie, but this was all too real. Governor Andrew Cuomo called it a masterpiece of criminal ingenuity. The escape route was beyond imagination. Cut through cell walls, crawled through a catwalk, snaked along steam pipes, and climbed through a manhole to freedom. One investigator said, "These men didn't just walk out, they disappeared." Almost immediately, over 1,500 officers from state police, U.S. Marshals, and the FBI began scouring the Adirondack Mountains. The terrain was dense, unforgiving, endless miles of trees, streams, and rocky hills that could hide anyone for weeks. Roadblocks were set up across upstate New York. Helicopters combed the air. Search teams moved through the woods, shoulder to shoulder, in rain and mud.
But Matt and Sweat were nowhere. No tracks, no stolen cars, no stolen clothes, nothing. Inside the prison, the mood turned from disbelief to outrage. How would this happen under maximum security? When investigators questioned Joyce Mitchell, the answers began to unravel. Joyce broke quickly under pressure. She confessed that she had smuggled hacksaw blades, chisels, and drill bits hidden inside frozen hamburger meat, tools that had helped the inmates cut through steel and concrete. She also admitted she was supposed to pick them up the night they escaped. "I was scared," she told police. "They said they'd kill my husband if I didn't help." But then her voice trembled. "I loved them, both of them." Her confession stunned the nation. A married mother and factory supervisor at a prison tailoring shop had risked everything for 2 convicted murderers. In the end, Joyce couldn't go through with the pickup. She got cold feet, claiming she had a panic attack. She drove herself to a hospital instead, leaving Matt and Sweat to fend for themselves in the wild. That one hesitation may have saved her life. Meanwhile, the search dragged on for days, then weeks. Tips flooded in from across New York and even into Vermont and Canada. Locals reported break-ins at cabins, missing food, and signs of campfires. Each clue led search teams deeper into the woods. But on June 20, 2 weeks after the escape, the manhunt finally broke open. A camp in Duane, New York was found ransacked, food missing, beer cans scattered, and DNA on a spoon that matched David Sweat. The fugitives were alive and close. Police tightened the perimeter. They set up heat-sensing drones, expanded roadblocks, and went door-to-door in rural towns. Fear spread like wildfire. "We were told to keep our kids inside, lock our barns, and not trust anyone knocking on the door," one resident recalled. Then, on June 26th, the manhunt turned deadly. In the small town of Malone, New York, a Border Patrol tactical team spotted a figure in the woods carrying a shotgun. When they shouted for him to drop it, the man turned. It was Richard Matt. He raised the weapon, and the agents opened fire. Matt was killed instantly. The other fugitive, Sweat, vanished into the trees. For investigators, it was a partial victory. One down, one still on the run. But for 2 more days, the tension was unbearable. "It was like hunting a ghost," said one trooper. Then came June 28th. Around 3:30 p.m., near the border country in Constable, New York, Sergeant Jay Cook was patrolling a quiet back road in Constable, New York, when he spotted a man walking alone. The man wore camouflage and a dirty jacket. When Cook called out, the fugitive bolted into a field. Cook gave chase on foot, yelling, "Get down, don't move!" But the fugitive kept running.
The sergeant fired 2 shots, hitting him twice in the torso. The man fell face first into the grass. As officers surrounded him, they realized it was David Sweat, the last escapee of Dannemora. He was barely conscious, but alive.
When asked why they escaped, Sweat later said, "We just wanted to feel the sun on our faces again." For 23 days, they'd survived on stolen food, creek water, and pure desperation, living like animals to outrun the law. Sweat admitted that they planned to head for Canada, but after Joyce didn't show up, their plan collapsed. The aftermath shook the entire New York correctional system. Prison staff were fired, security protocols rewritten, and Joyce Mitchell was sentenced to 7 years in prison for her role in the escape. She later told reporters, "I live with this every day. I wish I could take it all back." Richard Matt was dead. David Sweat was back behind bars, this time under 24-hour surveillance, and Clinton Correctional Facility was never the same. But the legacy of the escape lived on. It became a national obsession, a mix of lust, betrayal, and cunning that blurred the line between guard and prisoner, good and evil. To this day, people still drive past the prison walls in Dannemora and whisper about the hole in the cell wall, the one covered by a poster of a woman. A reminder that even behind concrete and steel, the human heart can be the weakest link in the system. And for Joyce Mitchell, who once said she just wanted to feel wanted, that desire became the spark that set off one of the greatest prison breaks in American history. In the end, justice caught up, but not before the world learned how dangerous love can be when it crosses the line between freedom and obsession. If you thought this story was wild, wait until you hear about the prisoner who vanished during a transfer flight and was never found again. Hit subscribe. You don't want to miss it.